Okay, assalamu alaikum and hello everyone. I want to start by thanking Professor Sophia Gilliatt-Ray for inviting me to talk about my work, and to thank the staff at the Islam UK Centre for making me feel so welcome, especially Mark, thank you. In today's presentation, I'm going to be providing an overview of the scope of the Everyday Muslim archive collections, how they are created, and briefly explain some of the reasons why I chose to archive. I will also share some of the ways we use the archival material to produce a variety of resources to engage various stakeholders, including academics, community and heritage organisations. I'm also going to be talking about how we collaborate with external partners to add new material to the archive collection, also to facilitate knowledge exchange and embed the narrative of the community experience into wider heritage activities of schools, mainstream archives and museums. All the examples I will share will be underpinned by qualitative feedback from some of the community, academic and heritage partners we've worked with over the past 10 years. So I'm going to start by saying that I'm not a historian, archivist or academic, and in all honesty, when I started on this journey 10 years ago, I didn't expect to be standing in a university talking about archives, but here I am. My LinkedIn page says that I'm a heritage consultant because I didn't know what else to call myself. In other industries, I'd be the concierge or the middleman or the fixer. I just get things done, so that's who I am. And I'm making this clear at the beginning because in all my years in this position, nothing is more obvious than the need for Muslims who are actual historians, archivists, educators and media professionals in positions of influence in which our narrative can be authentically represented, because there is no substitute for knowledge and expertise. And to also mention that every decision that has been made around the project is being carried out with the advice from heritage and educational practitioners. So as someone who was born and brought up in London, the depiction of Muslims in popular culture, such as TV and magazines, film and arts, didn't reflect my community or that of my friends or family, and often suggested negative stereotypes that again didn't characterise my lived experience. There were also no mention of Muslims or even Black and Asian people in the history that we were taught in school, except for the tokenistic mention of Mary Seacole during Black History Month, which never really felt like it was actual proper British history and just something that was stuck in the middle of the Black History Month. Then later, as a mother of young children, I didn't want them to face the same challenges of misrepresentation and the lack of sense of belonging and othering that I felt when I was growing up. After visiting local archives in East and North London and not finding much about the Muslim community other than newspaper cuttings about racism faced by the Bangladeshi community in East London in the 80s, I realised that our community's diversity, cultures and experiences were not being documented. I subsequently set up the Everyday Muslim Archive project in 2013 in response to that glaring absence of the Muslim narrative from the British archives, museums, the media and arts and academia. In partnership with British Bishopsgate Institute Library and Archive and a small volunteer team, we started a digital archive collection by recording oral history interviews and collecting photographs and documents, because this was the easiest way to start a collection of contemporary history from a culturally and socially diverse perspective. And because it was a way to build trust within the community before we progressed to collecting physical material and having a physical home for the archives. Most importantly, it gave the community the opportunity to record their experiences and memories, and it gave them the chance to reclaim their narrative and the ability to take ownership of their history by writing it in their own words. Since then, we've created 4 digital archive collections and one collection which can be accessed, one physical collection which can be accessed at Britain's first purpose-built mosque, the Shah Jahan in Woking. The Everyday Muslim Archive is the first of its kind to document and preserve the oldest and most contemporary narratives and experiences of the lives of Muslims in Britain, and it consists of material which has been generated by the 4 heritage projects. All the collections record 3 generations of memories and experiences, providing valuable witness statements of how the community has sought to maintain their religion, culture, heritage and identity, whilst building networks, raising a family and growing up in Britain as a Muslim, as well as emphasising the diversity of their cultures and traditions. Collecting everyday people's lived experiences has helped us uncover broad narratives of how groups of people who were often strangers came together and built communities to serve their faith and cultural requirements, and also of individual stories of everyday Muslims that contradict certain stereotypes, such as cultural patriarchy. For example, Jamila, who was one of the first Muslims, if not only woman, to have owned a clothing factory in the East End in the 1960s, or Aisha Abedin, who has been playing professional football for the past 20 years. The first collection is called We Weren't Expecting to Stay, which documents the lives of British South Asian Muslims from 1940 to 2015. I chose to start with the South Asian community narrative as it closely reflects my own ethnic background, and because the archived stories not only demonstrated the prevailing narrative of South Asian migration to fill the post-war labour shortage, but also the not so well documented stories of engineers, printers, teachers, PhD scholars, TV producers, biologists and even zoologists that made Britain their home from the 1950s. The second collection started as a research project with a diverse group of Black Muslim Londoners in 2015. The collection is called The Heritage Story of Black Muslims in London. It felt necessary that the Black Muslim narrative was next to be documented, as they are a minority within a minority and often overlooked when Muslim communities spoken about, particularly in Britain. In 2018, as a result of our heritage work with the Black Muslim community, we were approached to work with the Muslim Council of Britain, who were seeking to correct the lack of representation and engagement in their own organisation. After several community consultations and events, including one at the House of Commons, we co-produced a collection of essays called Race, Faith and Community in Contemporary Britain, essays on Black and African-Caribbean Muslims in the UK, with the objective of creating a platform to review and consider the current state of race and power relations within the Muslim and broader community, while also creating meaningful networks and partnerships. The report can be downloaded from the education section of our website. Presently, the collections are deposited at five separate depositories, including Bishopsgate Institute Archive and Library, George Padmore Institute, Shah Jahan Mosque and Surrey History Centre, and a fourth collection is being collected in partnership with Oxford University. It was always a conscious decision to place the archives in public institutions so that our history is placed within the context of British history and not documented as a separate entity. All the collections are at various stages of cataloguing. Currently, the number of items across the three collections is approximately 1,200. As well as the physical objects at the mosque, the collection also includes oral history interviews, educational resources, film footage of physical and online events, exhibition panels, podcasts, and many other resources that have been created over the past 10 years. Most of the resources are available on the website and YouTube channel, and we're working at the moment to try and get all of the archive material online as well. Although we don't have a number of how many times the archive is accessed, we do know that it's used by academics, including undergrads, MA and PhD students, market researchers, and the project has also been cited in various social policies, such as the Missing Muslims, conducted by Citizens UK. It is also used by film and documentary makers for the authenticity of props and costume reference. And other organisations use our resources, such as the exhibition panels, for diversity training. So why archives? The archives in Britain have significant absences regarding the lived Muslim narrative. This is either because Muslim presence has not been documented or because archival material has been mislabelled or uncatalogued. Where related archives do exist, such as the National Archives, the material is largely focused on the colonial correspondence and not on the Muslims that have lived in Britain for many centuries. In other cases, knowledge of Islam and Muslims is limited and therefore can add to the erasure of the particular narrative. By preserving and archiving these materials, researchers can fill researchers can help to fill the gaps in our understanding of Muslim history and culture and to provide a more nuanced and accurate picture of the past. In the case of research, whether for academia, journalism or the arts and media, it was important to me that the material we create is authentic and representative of the narratives and culture of the community it represents. This point is significant when considering stereotypes of Muslims. In the past 5 years or so, there have been an explosion in online Muslim-centered magazines that are doing an amazing job of amplifying the experiences of stories of Muslims in Britain. And there is also a push for more representation of Muslims in journalism, which I completely advocate and support. But the point that is often overlooked is that the so-called positive stories about Muslims can have a counterintuitive impact because so much of the identity and representation historically is based on negative and inaccurate stereotypes. Moving forward, we really need to encourage the interrogation of inaccurate stereotypes, which form the foundation from which we reflect our successes, as a failure to do so is going to also add to the erasure of our authentic identity and history. For example, there have been many stories of young Muslim women being the first in the field of sports. And although these stories are truly inspirational and newsworthy, they are in cases wholly inaccurate because Muslim women in Britain have been involved in professional sports for decades. So unless these stories are archived, or our experiences and contributions and our role models will be forgotten within the shorter term of even living history and eventually erased until the next generation will come along and it's given the impression that they are the first. And instead of our communities progressing and building on the successes of the predecessors, we are collectively stuck on square one. So I chose archiving over other modes of representation because an archive will ultimately be the legacy to supersede us. Before moving on, I'd like to make a quick comment in reference to the saying that if it's on the internet, then it's already archived, because you'll also be very familiar with that. It really is not. I hear a lot of people say to me, especially young people, but it's on the internet, or I've archived it on my Instagram. No, that's not archiving. And I'll explain a little bit why that isn't later in the presentation. Producing a wide range of resources from the archival material helps us engage the community by demonstrating to them that their stories can be presented within the context of history in a way in which the Muslim community have traditionally been absent, such as exhibitions and classroom resources. Okay, heritage tours and trails. These have proven to play a significant role in helping communities feel included, particularly in outdoor spaces. Through sites like Brookwood Cemetery, we are provided with narratives that are meaningful to the community and the larger historical narrative. Heritage trails have the potential to empower communities by actively inviting them to preserve, interpret and share their history, ultimately fostering a sense of identity, pride and connection to their past in a built environment outside of the traditional learning spaces like the classroom. We're going to educational resources. We've also created many Key Stage 2 and 3 classroom resources on subjects such as migration and changing roles of women in work, the Black Muslim experience and the history of significant Muslim sites in Britain. These have all been produced to support teachers in portraying diverse histories that reflect their locality and classroom. More importantly, they give students something to which they can relate to. Other such resources we've produced include a practical guide for mosques and madrasas on how to archive their history. And we also conduct lots of workshops for children and adults, ranging from carrying out oral history interviews, creating family archives, or looking at the history of Islam and Muslims in Britain. And for anything that we're working on currently, you can check us out on our social media platforms. Instagram, really for the younger people, Twitter for you guys. So internships are another way in which collaborative efforts are seeing Muslim history being placed within broader resources on British history. For example, the Institute of Historical Research approached us to help them make Muslim stories and histories more visible in their digital history project, Layers of London, and help them to bring diverse stories to wider audiences. Internships are also extremely valuable investment. Through them, we can place Muslim historians and archivists in paid roles in established heritage organisations. We can help also demonstrate to those organisations the benefit of employing Muslim professionals when it comes to researching and portraying Muslim history in the context of British history, as they can provide a unique insight to the Muslim faith and culture that is evidently missing, especially in the framework of curation in museums and archives and popular culture. Collaborations and partnerships help to maintain our aim of raising the visibility of Muslim history in the context of broader history. Collaborations with universities and community heritage groups is another way in which we create archive materials and learning resources and make them available outside of our digital platforms. And I am also trying and sharing our experiences with other community heritage practitioners to support them in reaching wider audiences and benefit from knowledge exchange where possible. Last year I participated in the Mayor of London's London Unseen programme, which was a series of events organised to highlight London's diverse histories. I curated an event with Queen Mary University to explore how community heritage groups can partner with universities to co-create and benefit from knowledge exchange. The two events were recorded and can be found on the Mayor of London's website. The second event I curated was based on the notion of remembrance and memorialisation of the partition of India, titled A Very British History, Partition 75 Years On. And it was an event that brought together the Asian community and academics who specialise in the research of partition. Unlike other events, ours was focused on the education of and understanding of partition from the British Asian community perspective. And we raised the question that if the event should be memorialised, how should it be and what would that memorial look like? Due to the success of that project, we have now been awarded a grant from the Mayor of London's Untold Stories Fund for a 6-month project which will allow us to form an advisory board, choose an organisational structure and host workshops and events. We will also be creating a physical and digital heritage trail. The trail will also be based in London on the historical, political and social activities of South Asian figures in London during the post-war period, linked with the events of partition in India and the stories of survivors now residing in London. Working with the National Archives has also proved to be a very valuable means of knowledge exchange. With their support, I produced the guide for mosques and madrasas on archiving, which also can be downloaded from the education section of the website. And as a founding member of the steering group Records at Risk, our responsibility was to create and co-create and consider with the National Archives appropriate steps to better manage the risks and challenges faced by vulnerable archive collections. My contribution has seen the addition of records not archived being added to the definition of being at risk, because usually records at risk usually are records that have lost their home or are at potentially risk of being destroyed by floods or just the care and the conservation of the archives. But if something hasn't been considered, it's something that they haven't considered, because unless you're a minority and you haven't experienced that erasure on that basis of just not being recorded in the first place. So public engagement, over the past 10 years we've shared our work in over 25 conferences, which has allowed our archives to gain visibility and recognition within the broader academic and historical community and share perspectives and insights into unique community narratives with a wider audience. The exchange of knowledge and collaboration through facilitation, whether they be workshops or conferences between community archivists or academic researchers, has provided us with a platform for sharing the continuous work of the initiative, as well as leading to some fruitful partnerships. Engaging in public discourse and presenting to various organisations and communities will amplify our impact, foster further collaboration and help distribute valuable resources. Participating in history conferences has also helped us to validate our work and legitimise our efforts. Including Everyday Muslim in the conversation demonstrates that our archives are a vital part of that larger archival landscape and have a valuable role in preserving and interpreting history. It helps challenge the notion that historical research and archiving are solely the domain of academic institutions, and instead highlights the importance of grassroots and community-led archival practices. So the myth of the Emerald City. So it seems on the outside, everyone thinks Everyday Muslim is a well-resourced, well-staffed and well-funded organisation, when in fact it's really not. And I kind of find myself in the unsustainable and impractical position of the Wizard of Oz, because my role is actually 90% on a voluntary basis, and especially after COVID, our main work of collecting archives is not funded. Funding, the F word, is very limited and often limiting, and it limits also our documenting to geographical locations, specific timelines, subjects or communities, which greatly limits our overall ability to collect the archival material, which we just want to get on with. What most people don't realise is that when you collect and record for an archive, it isn't as same as recording or taking a photograph on your phone, and that we have to use specific formats that are digitally sustainable over a long period of time. This means increased costs because we need to use specialist equipment, and it means a lot more time to create and maintain the digital assets as we need specialist knowledge. Nevertheless, we aim to pursue a future for Everyday Muslim in continuing to document and preserve these histories and working collaboratively with community, academics, heritage organisations and the media to create opportunities for engagement and increase the authentic representation of Muslims in Britain in the historical records of the archives, education and the media. So how we're going to do this, or how we need to be doing this, is that we need funding for organisational stability. Project by project funding is not going to, work in the long run. So that's something that we're looking at doing, reaching out to Muslim philanthropists and getting them to see the value of archives and what that means. Making the whole archive available online is something we're also working towards, so that it's completely and fully accessible, even though you can go to all of the archive collections and it's accessible there. But obviously if it's online, then it just makes it easier. Providing a wide range of training opportunities to develop further archivists, heritage project managers and project developers was always the plan right from the beginning, so that I wouldn't be the Wizard of Oz. But it just never has happened because project funding doesn't work in that way. So that's something else we need to look at, find ways of being able to develop those programs in other ways. And creating regional hubs to collect and document archives within local communities. I get phone calls, messages, emails on a daily basis. Have you spoken to so-and-so? Because he's really old and you need to document his story. And do you know this person? And do you know that person? Have you spoken to this person? Have you archived this organisation's? I'm like, no, because it's just me and I can't. So, we have to work towards doing this in a more sustainable way, because after 10 years, it's not been an easy ride. So those are the kind of challenges and limitations that we have in doing this work. So what we need from you is really kind of simple things, really. When you're, as academics, when you're working and collecting your research and data, if you can add to your agreement forms or the ethic forms that eventually that this research and data will be collected and archived. It just makes it easier for that to then be used, because when I talk to academics, they always say, oh, I didn't think of that. I could have done that because I don't really need those notes, but I can't give them to you now because of GDPR and everything. So those are the kind of considerations that I'd like you guys to think about. Also support our efforts to record the oral histories, because even though it's difficult, it's not if you have the right guidance. So, if you want to record your grandmother's story or, someone in the local community that is really significant in helping create that community, then just reach out to us and we can guide you on how to do that. Consider partnering with us if there's some kind of research project that we can work with you in the archive side of things, and let us know. And share our resources with individual and organisations who may not have heard of us. So, just send them the website, especially teachers and other madrasas and homeschoolers, because there's a lot of resources on our website that they can relate to. So the star of the show that I nearly forgot, which is the mapping project, which is something that I've really been thinking about and working on in different formats since 2015, when we had our first symposium. And after our first symposium, it was really clear to me that there needed to be an online space where heritage practitioners from various organisations could connect and share resources and their research. For me, as like an outsider, it just didn't make sense that all these people were in the room. There was like 150 people in the room saying that, well, first of all, there's never been anything like this. And second of all, we've met people working on something similar, and if we'd known, it would have made our life a lot easier. So I've been working on different iterations of this, but now we've come to Muslim history maps, which we're hoping to launch at the end of the year. And this is like the first stage of the wider platform. So Muslim History Maps is going to be a digital mapping project which collects and shares the history of global Muslim civilizations, past and present. It was supposed to be, when I first thought of it, as Muslim History Maps UK, but then I realised that there was actually no real reason to limit that, so we took out the UK. The records and collections will include information on archives, artifacts, manuscripts, photographs, maps, art, video, films, academic research, oral history recordings, and other crowdsourced knowledge of the history of Muslims. The unique map will geographically position Muslim history dating back centuries while connecting it with a living history in the present day. Through the map, we hope to create a network that links academics, historians, archivists, heritage professionals and researchers and communities, and help them to share and understand the history of Muslims in Britain.